Let me be clear about something before you read a single word of what follows. I have been an archivist for 31 years. I have processed incident reports from species encounters spanning 412 documented civilizations. I have filed reports on the Vethori collapse, the Marindin Plague Wars, the silent purge of the drift colonies. I have read accounts of violence and survival that would make most beings set down their data slates and walk out of the room. None of those files made me feel the way this one did. Not because of the violence. We understand violence. Violence is common. Violence is almost boring at this point. It's just energy applied in the wrong direction, and every species does it eventually. What made this file different was the smile. That's the part nobody can explain. Not the survival, though the survival alone should have been impossible. Not the wound, which was documented, photographed, and confirmed by 7 separate medical officers from 5 different species. Not even the fact that he kept walking, because organisms sometimes continue functioning on residual biochemical momentum even after fatal trauma. It was the smile. He knew what had happened. He looked down at the wound. He looked at the soldier who had fired. He looked at the crowd of civilians and dignitaries and military officers who had all stopped breathing at once, and he smiled, not grimly, not desperately, not with that manic edge that some species develop under extreme duress. He smiled like a man who had just heard a joke. He'd been waiting his whole life for someone to finally tell. I have been trying to understand that smile for 2 years. This file is my attempt to do so. What follows is a complete compilation of witness testimonies, field reports, medical analysis, psychological evaluations, and intelligence assessments gathered in the 22 months following what has come to be known internally, and I should note, unofficially, as the wiping. Read carefully. Senior Archivist Delouvain Cross. Intelligence Sector 9, Galactic Sentinel Bureau. Part 1, The Caldera Platform. Section 1.1, Environmental Context and Pre-Incident Atmosphere. Testimony source, Civilian Observer Yellen Brast, Diplomatic Correspondent, Tau Meridian Press Collective. Interview date, stardate 7/4/125, 3 days post-incident. Interview location, GSB Processing Station, Orbital Ring 7. Interviewer, Field Analyst Corinne Davish. Transcript begins. You want to know what it was like before it happened. Okay, I'll tell you exactly what it was like. The Caldera Platform, and if you've never been, I'm sorry for you, it really is something, sits at the intersection of 3 trade corridors. That's the diplomatic reason it exists. The real reason it exists is that somebody, a long time ago, decided it would be profitable to build a city on a floating platform above a geothermal vent field, and they were right. And now it's been there for about 200 years, and it's grown into this incredible layered thing. Tier 1 is all finance and commerce. Tier 2 is residential and hospitality. Tier 3, the top tier where all this happened, is the diplomatic and administrative crown. Open air. Exposed sky. The geothermal vents down below give everything this faint heat shimmer, like the air is slightly alive. On the day of the summit, Tier 3 was packed, not chaotic packed, organized packed. You know how diplomatic events get. Everything is arranged within a centimeter of its life. Banners, checkpoints. Uniformed personnel from about 15 different military branches. The whole visual language of we are being civilized and deliberate. The weather was strange, I remember that. There was supposed to be clear visibility for the outdoor ceremony, but about 2 hours before the opening, this low thermal fog had rolled in from the vent fields below. Not thick enough to obscure anything, but enough to give the whole platform a kind of diffused, silvery light. Everything looked slightly soft around the edges. Like a dream, but a very organized, well-administered dream. I was there as a press correspondent. I had credentials for the outer observation ring, which put me about 40 meters from the central ceremonial dais, close enough to see faces. far enough that I needed my magnification lens to read expressions clearly. The Ninth Fleet Honor Guard had arrived earlier that morning. That's important context. These were Vrethkin soldiers, and if you've never encountered Vrethkin military personnel in formal dress uniform, the effect is considerable. They average about 2.3 meters tall. Their exoskeletal carapace plates shift color under different light conditions, so in the thermal fog they were doing this slow, pulsing, iridescent thing, deep blues and purples cycling through silver. Their ceremonial plasma lances were polished to a mirror finish. They moved in absolute unison. They were, objectively, terrifying in the way that pure precision is terrifying. And standing among them, at the checkpoint between the outer ring and the inner ceremonial area, was the human. I noticed him early. I noticed him because he stood out, which I think was the point, and also because he was doing something I'd never seen a checkpoint officer do, which was nothing. Just standing, completely still, not scanning, not checking data slates, not having quiet conversations with colleagues, just standing with his hands loose at his sides, watching the flow of arrivals with this expression I couldn't quite categorize. He was in the standard Terran diplomatic security uniform. Dark gray, no ornamentation, not flashy at all compared to the Vrethkin display around him. Average human height, which relative to the Vrethkin Honor Guard meant he looked like a sapling surrounded by old-growth trees. Brown skin, short hair, carrying a little more wear around the eyes than you'd expect for someone who was probably, 40, 45. Hard to tell with humans. What I noticed most was his stillness. Not the trained stillness of a soldier at attention. Different, quieter, like someone sitting on a porch at the end of a long day, watching the road, not worried about what might come down it. I remember thinking, that man looks unbothered. I had no idea how right I was. Transcript continues, segment break. Section 1.2, Personnel Identification and Assignment Log. Document type, Official Personnel File, Summit Security Roster. Filed by Caldera Platform Security Coordination Office. Document date, Stardate 7/4/119, 3 days pre-incident. Officer designation, Terra Prime 7, Galactic Sentinel classification. Human name, Marcus Elloway Vane. Age, 47, Terran Standard. Rank, Senior Field Operative, Terran Diplomatic Protection Corps. Assignment, Inner Checkpoint Security, 3rd Tier Ceremonial Zone, Caldera Platform Summit. Service Record Summary, 22 years active service. Field deployments in 11 systems. Commendations, 14. Disciplinary incidents, 0. Medical flags, 3, all resolved. Notation, subject maintains unusual biomarker profiles. See attached medical annex. Supervisor notes, Liaison Officer Prith Van Das. Vane is effective and unobtrusive. He has the rare quality of appearing relaxed while maintaining complete environmental awareness. Other species sometimes interpret his stillness as inattentiveness. This is a mistake. Recommend inner checkpoint assignment. His non-threatening presentation is useful for civilian traffic management. Notation added post-incident. Classification status upgraded. File transferred to Tier Crimson. All associated personnel records sealed pending full GSIB review. Section 1.3. The arrival of Commander Dreth Vale. Testimony source, Protocol Officer Semna Al, Vrethkin Diplomatic Mission. Interview date, Stardate 7/4/128, 7 days post-incident. Interview location, Vrethkin Consulate, Orbital Ring 11. Interviewer, Senior Analyst Rovan Tesk. Transcript begins. I want to be precise about the sequence of events, because I've seen reports circulating that get the sequence wrong. Commander Dreth Vale arrived at the outer checkpoint at approximately 2 hours before the opening ceremony. He was not scheduled. This is the first important fact. The commander was not on the security roster for the inner ceremonial area. His credentials authorized him for the outer observation ring, which is where press and general diplomatic observers were stationed. The reason for this distinction matters. The inner ceremonial zone hosted the actual signing delegation. There were active treaty instruments in that zone, along with representatives from 7 species whose political relationships are complicated. The security protocols for the inner zone were specific and deliberate. You didn't just walk in. Commander Vale, and I want to be careful here, because he is a senior Vrethkin officer and protocol, requires me to acknowledge that, had developed a reputation within our diplomatic corps for treating security protocols as guidelines rather than requirements. He had done this before. At the Meridian Accords, he bypassed 3 separate checkpoints using command authority overrides. At the Delphani Conference, he walked through a secure perimeter and then argued with the security supervisor for 20 minutes about jurisdiction. He believed, I think genuinely, that his rank entitled him to go wherever he chose. He arrived at the inner checkpoint with 4 members of his personal retinue. The checkpoint was staffed by 2 Vrethkin soldiers and Officer Vane. Vale presented his credentials. The Vrethkin checkpoint soldiers did what soldiers do when confronted with a senior officer. They hesitated. You could see it. That awful hesitation between protocol and hierarchy. Officer Vane did not hesitate. He stepped forward, not aggressively, just forward, and said something to Commander Vale. Quietly. I wasn't close enough to hear the words. But I could see the body language, and the body language was clear. You don't come through here. What happened next is what set everything in motion. Commander Vale looked at Officer Vane. Then he looked at the Vrethkin soldiers on either side. Then he looked back at Vane, and he drew his plasma sidearm. I want to be very clear about this. He drew his weapon first, before anything else. He drew it and he pressed it to Officer Vane's chest. Not as a threat, not as a display. He pressed it directly to the man's chest at point-blank range and he fired. Interviewer note: witness paused here for approximately 40 seconds. The following portion of the transcript was recorded after a brief recess. I've been a protocol officer for 19 years. I've seen political confrontations. I've seen heated negotiations that turned physical. I've seen beings draw weapons at diplomatic events, which is always terrifying because those situations can escalate in seconds into something catastrophic. I have never seen what I saw next. The shot was not low yield. I know what low-yield plasma discharges look like. They're used for warning shots, crowd control. This was not that. This was a direct chest shot at contact range. The discharge was visible even in the thermal fog. There was a concussive sound. There was smoke. There was, I could see from where I stood, a clear entry wound on the left side of Officer Vane's chest, below the collarbone. He stumbled, 1 step back, just 1. Then he stood still. Then he looked down at the wound. Then, and I keep coming back to this because I keep thinking I must have misread it, he reached up with 1 hand and he wiped the blood from the wound. Just wiped it away. The way you'd wipe away a smudge. The way you'd wipe a bit of dust off your jacket. And then he looked at Commander Vale. And he smiled. I cannot explain the smile. I have tried. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't the smile of someone who just survived something and was relieved. It was knowing, patient. The smile of someone who has been waiting for a long time to show someone something, and the moment has finally arrived. Then he kept walking. Walked directly to Commander Vale's retinue, took the plasma sidearm from Vale's hand, and Vale gave it up without resistance, which tells you something, and directed every member of that retinue to the outer ring access point. He walked normally, he stood normally, he processed the security deflection normally, and then he returned to his post. I don't think he was pretending. I don't think it was a performance. I think that's just who he is. Transcript ends. Part 2. What the medical officers saw. Section 2.1. Immediate post-incident medical assessment. Document type: Emergency Medical Report. Filed by Dr. Ivan Karas, Galactic Sentinel Medical Corps, Station 7. Report date: Stardate 7/4/122, day of incident. Officer Vane was escorted to the medical bay at Tier 3's administrative complex approximately 18 minutes after the incident. He walked to the medical bay under his own power. He did not appear to be in distress. His gait was normal. His color was appropriate for his species. He did not request assistance. When I first examined him, my initial assessment was equipment malfunction or report error. The wound description I had received, point-blank plasma discharge, direct chest contact, was inconsistent with the patient in front of me. A wound of that description should have been fatal. At minimum, it should have produced catastrophic tissue damage, hemorrhagic shock, and almost certainly cardiac involvement. What I found on initial examination was a wound that was healing. I want to be precise here, because precision matters in medical documentation, and also because I am aware this report is going to be read by people who are looking for errors. The wound was real. There was an entry site approximately 4.7 centimeters in diameter, left anterior chest wall, subclavicular region. The surrounding tissue showed evidence of plasma burn, the characteristic heat scorching and cellular disruption consistent with a high-yield plasma discharge. There was blood, which had been partially wiped away, consistent with witness accounts. But the wound itself, during my examination, was closing. Not slowly, not in the way that wounds close over days and weeks. The wound was visibly, measurably closing in real time. The cellular edges were pulling together. The hemorrhage had stopped, not slowed, stopped, with no medical intervention. By the time I had completed my initial visual examination, the wound had reduced by approximately 30% from its entry state. I have been a medical officer for 23 years. I have worked with species from across the Galactic Charter. I have read accounts of regenerative biology. There are species that can regrow limbs, species whose cellular repair mechanisms operate at accelerated rates compared to baseline biological norms. I had never seen a human do this. I asked Officer Vane directly. I said, "Can you explain what I'm looking at?" He said, and I recorded this verbatim because I knew I would need it, "That's what we do." Then he looked at me with that quality of quiet attention that I later heard described by others, and he said, "We've been doing it for about 400,000 years. We just haven't had a reason to show anyone yet." Section 2.2, Full Medical Analysis, GSIB Research Division. Document type: Analysis Report, Classified Tier Crimson. Filed by Research Lead Fen Vastori, GSIB Biological Division. Report date: Stardate 7/4/167, 45 days post-incident. Summary of findings. Following the incident on the Caldera platform, Officer Marcus Vane cooperated fully with a comprehensive biological assessment conducted under standard medical research protocols and informed consent. The findings of this assessment are summarized below. Full data packages are available to authorized personnel. Finding 1. Cellular repair acceleration. Human cellular repair mechanisms operate at a baseline rate that is, frankly, not remarkable. Humans are not, in general, remarkable healers. They suffer injuries, they recover, sometimes they don't. This is what we knew. What we did not know, what nothing in any prior documentation had suggested, was that under conditions of extreme physiological stress, a subset of human individuals appears to possess what our biology team has termed trauma cascade regeneration. This is not, we should be clear, universal among humans. It is not even common, but it is real, it is documented, and it is present in Officer Vane. Trauma cascade regeneration refers to a biological response in which the body, upon registering severe trauma input, essentially stops normal metabolic processing and redirects near-total biological resource allocation to cellular repair. The effect is regeneration, at a rate approximately 40 to 60 times faster than baseline human healing. To put this in physical terms, a wound that would take a standard human 6 to 8 weeks to closed, in Officer Vane's case, in approximately 4 hours. Finding 2. Pain processing. This is the finding that most disturbed our psychology team. Officer Vane's pain response during the incident and the subsequent medical examination was assessed using standard neurological monitoring protocols. What we found was not that he felt no pain, he felt it. His neurological pain signals were consistent with the severity of the injury. He felt the wound. He chose not to respond to it. This distinction is important. We are not talking about a species that does not experience pain. We are talking about a species, or at minimum an individual, that experiences pain and processes it as information rather than as an overwhelming directive. Our psychology team's assessment. Officer Vane experienced a pain signal equivalent to severe traumatic injury. He registered this signal, assessed its implications, determined that the implications did not require him to alter his current behavioral objectives, and continued his behavioral objectives. The pain did not stop. He stopped responding to it. Finding 3. The smile. We asked Officer Vane about the smile. Specifically, we asked him what he was feeling in the moment he looked at Commander Vale after being shot. His answer was this: relief mostly. We pressed him to elaborate. You have to understand, humans have been around for a long time. We've been the small ones for most of our history. Not the biggest, not the fastest, not the most armored. Just the ones who kept getting up. And for a while out here, everyone assumed because we're small and we're soft-looking and we negotiate and we talk, that we got up because nothing serious had ever knocked us down. That we'd never been really tested. That we were polite because we were safe. When Commander Vale fired at me, the first thing I felt was pain. The second thing I felt was, this is going to sound strange, gratitude. Because now someone knows. Now it's in the open. We've been carrying this thing for 400,000 years and nobody knew what it meant. Now at least one person knows what it means. We asked him what it means. He said that we were always going to survive whatever came. We just hadn't needed to prove it yet. Section 2.3, Psychological Profile Update. Document Type, Psychological Assessment Report. Filed by Dr. Tamla Voros, GSIB Behavioral Science Division. Report date, Stardate 7/4/189, 67 days post-incident. Over the course of 12 assessment sessions, Officer Vane submitted to comprehensive psychological evaluation. The following summary represents the core findings relevant to this case file. Trait assessment, fear response. Officer Vane presents with what our standard assessment instruments classified, initially, as a significantly suppressed fear response. Further evaluation revised this classification. It is not suppressed, it is calibrated. Most sapient species experience fear as a relatively binary signal. Danger is present, danger must be avoided. The specifics of the danger and the specifics of the response are processed, but the directional thrust of fear, away, 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 is consistent. Officer Vane's fear response is directional but not directionally fixed. His fear signals when present appear to be processed as: danger is present, danger must be assessed, appropriate response must be selected. The response is sometimes away. Sometimes it is stillness. Sometimes, and this is the relevant finding for our purposes, it is directly toward. He does not run toward danger because he is unafraid. He runs toward danger because his fear assessment has determined that running toward is the correct response. Trait assessment, identity under pressure. I spent considerable time asking Officer Vane about his sense of self, about who he is, how he understands himself, what he believes about his own nature. His answers were consistently calm, consistently specific, and consistently at odds with the humility we typically associate with beings who are genuinely humble. He said, "I know what I am. I've always known what I am. Not in a proud way, not in a bragging way, just I know. The same way you know what the material your house is built from is. You know its tensile strength. You know how much pressure it can take before it bends. You know what it does under heat. That's all I have. I just know what I'm made of." I asked him, "What are you made of?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Survival, 400,000 years of it. Every ancestor who should have died and didn't. Every winter that should have killed us. Every predator that should have taken us. Every plague and drought and flood and ice age and catastrophe. We're not made of strength. We're made of the decision made 100,000 generations ago to still be here in the morning. That's all a bullet is. It's a winter. It's a predator. It's a test. We've passed every single test that has ever been given to us, not because we're the biggest. Because we decided we were going to pass it." Part 3. The Witnesses. Section 3.1. Account of Corporal Henrave Das, Vrethkin Honor Guard. Testimony source: Corporal Henrave Das, 9th Fleet Honor Guard. Interview date: Stardate 7/4/131, 10 days post-incident. Interview location: Fleet Processing Station, Sector 4. Transcript begins. "I am going to tell you what I saw, and I am going to be accurate, and I will not change my account regardless of what pressure is applied to me to do so. I want that on the record first. I was stationed at the inner checkpoint. I was to the left of Officer Vane. My partner Kell was to the right. We had been at the checkpoint for approximately 2 hours when Commander Vale arrived. I recognized the commander immediately. You know Vale by reputation in the fleet. He is not a subtle presence. He arrived with his retinue, 4 officers, and he presented credentials with the manner of someone who expects the credentials to be unnecessary because his face should be sufficient. I looked at the credentials. I looked at the access designation. I understood the designation was incorrect for the inner zone, and I must be honest here, I hesitated. This is what happens with rank. You know the correct protocol, and you know the rank of the person in front of you, and the two things conflict, and your body goes into a kind of gridlock. Officer Vane did not go into gridlock. He was at the center position. He stepped forward, not dramatically, just one step, and he spoke to Commander Vale. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard, "Sir, outer ring access, inner zone restricted." The words were correct protocol. The tone was not aggressive, not deferential, just completely, absolutely calm, like he was explaining the time of day. Vale looked at him. I've seen Vale deal with subordinates, and I know what that look means. It means, you are an obstacle I am going to remove. He drew his weapon. Here is what I want to document because I want it in the official record. I did not move. I failed to move. In the moment that Commander Vale raised his weapon, I did not take action to prevent the discharge. This is a dereliction I will carry for the rest of my service. I froze. Kell also froze. 2 trained honor guard soldiers froze, and a human security officer did not. He didn't move either, but his not moving was different. He stood his ground. There is a distinction. We froze because we were paralyzed. He held because he chose to. The discharge was the sound was wrong. At contact range, the thermal bloom is immediate. There is no trajectory. There is just impact. I saw the impact. I saw him go back 1 step. And then I saw him stand up straight. There's a concept in Vrethkin warrior tradition. We call it Vethkel. It doesn't translate perfectly, but the nearest approximation is the moment when you understand that your opponent has gone somewhere you cannot follow. It's the moment when you realize you are fighting something that operates by different rules than the ones you know. We don't consider it a defeat exactly. We consider it a revelation, a moment of knowing. I felt Vethkel when he stood up straight. And then he wiped the blood away. And then he smiled. I don't have the words for the smile in my own language. I have been trying to find them. The closest I can get is the smile of something very old, finally recognized. When he took the weapon from Commander Vale's hand and I watched this happen, I was 3 meters away. He did not grab it. He simply opened his hand beneath the weapon. And Vale, who is one of the most aggressive officers in the Ninth Fleet, placed the weapon in his palm, quietly, without protest. I think Vale in that moment also felt Vethkel. We all did. Transcript ends. Section 3.2. Account of Ambassador Tyrell San, Delphani Trade Delegation. Testimony source, Ambassador Tyrell San. Interview date, stardate 7/4/135, 14 days post-incident. Interview location, Delphani Consular Offices, Caldera Platform. Transcript begins. My species is old. Not in the way humans are old, we are old in institutional memory. We have been spacefaring for 11,000 years. We have met many species. We have seen many things that surprised us. I am going to say something that my protocol advisors have suggested I not say, and I am going to say it anyway. The Delphani have, for some time, regarded humans as an interesting minor species. Friendly, useful in certain capacities, diplomatically engaged, but minor, young. Still in the process of becoming something. I was sitting in the outer observation ring when the incident occurred. I had my aide with me, a young officer named Preth who was at his first major summit. He is the one who pointed it out to me. He had better visual resolution than I do, he said. Ambassador, something is happening at the checkpoint. By the time I had raised my optical lens, I saw Officer Vane standing with a plasma wound in his chest that should have killed him, wiping blood from his chest, smiling. Preth said, "What is he?" And I realized in that moment that I did not have a complete answer to that question. 11,000 years of spacefaring civilization, and I did not have a complete answer. Here is what I told him. I told him, he is what humans become when you push them hard enough. Preth thought about this. Then he said, have we been pushing them too lightly? I think that was the most important question asked on the Caldera platform that day. More important than any treaty language. More important than any security report. Have we been pushing them too lightly? Are we only now beginning to understand what they are? I don't know, but I spent the rest of that summit watching Officer Vane stand at his post, wounded, healing, completely unbothered, and I kept thinking, we have been treating these beings as guests in a house they might actually own. Transcript ends. Section 3.3. Account of Press Correspondent Yellen Brast, continued. Interview date, stardate 7/4/140, 19 days post-incident follow-up session. Transcript begins. Sorry, I asked to come back, because I felt like I hadn't finished the first time. After everything settled, after the medical team came and went and Vane sent them away politely and then came back to his post, after the retinue was processed through the outer ring and veil, I heard this secondhand, sat in the outer ring for the entire remainder of the summit without speaking to anyone. After all of that, I went to the checkpoint. I know that's not standard press practice, but I'm a human too, Terran-born Vance City. And there was something happening there that I needed to understand from a particular angle. I walked up to the checkpoint. Vane looked at me. He checked my press credentials. He actually checked them, I want to note. He didn't just wave me through, and then he said, "Outer ring access. You're good to go." And I said, "Are you okay?" He looked at me for a second, not suspiciously, just assessing whether the question deserved a real answer or a polite deflection. He gave me a real answer. He said, "Yeah." Just that, yeah. And then after a pause he said, "Thanks for asking." And I started crying, right there at the checkpoint. because he said thanks for asking like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he'd been shot 40 minutes ago and someone had asked if he was okay and he was grateful that someone thought to do that. Not performing gratitude, not deflecting, just present, just a person at a checkpoint who had survived something extraordinary and was still being kind about it. I asked him because I was already crying and it didn't matter at this point. I said, "How are you still standing?" He thought about it, actually thought about it like it was a genuine question worth genuine consideration. Then he said, "Because standing is better than not standing, and I figured that out early enough to still be doing it." I used that quote in my article. My editor wanted to cut it, said it was too simple. I told her that was the whole point. Transcript ends. Part 4. The Interrogation of Commander Drthval. Section 4.1. Initial Interrogation Record. Document Type. Official Interrogation Transcript, Fleet Disciplinary Division. Subject, Commander Drthval, 9th Galactic Fleet. Interrogation Date. Stardate 7/4/126, 4 days post-incident. Lead Interrogator, Fleet Advocate Mena Versk. Advocate Virsk, Commander Vale. Let's begin with the straightforward question. Why did you discharge your weapon at Officer Vane? Commander Val, he was in my way. Advocate Virsk, he was performing his assigned function. Commander Val, he was a human. Checkpoint security, I am a fleet commander. Advocate Virsk, your rank does not authorize access to the inner ceremonial zone at the Caldera Summit. Your credentials were correctly evaluated. You were correctly redirected. Instead of complying with standard protocol, you fired a weapon at the officer performing his duty. I need you to tell me why. Commander Val, pause, I expected him to move. Advocate Virsk, he was shot at contact range with a plasma sidearm at non-warning yield. He did move. He moved 1 step backward. Commander Val, I expected him to fall. Advocate Virsk, he did not fall. Commander Val, no, he did not. Advocate Virsk, what did you observe after you fired? Commander Val, extended pause, he stood up straight. He looked down at the wound. He wiped the blood with his hand, just wiped it, like it was nothing. And then he looked at me. Advocate Virsk, and then? Commander Val, he smiled. And I pause, I gave him the weapon. I don't know why I gave him the weapon. He didn't threaten me. He didn't demand it. He just held his hand out and it seemed like the correct thing to do. It seemed like the only thing to do. Advocate Virsk, what were you feeling in that moment? Commander Val, very long pause, I felt small. I know what that means for a Vrethkin officer to say. I know the implications. I am telling you anyway because you asked and because I believe in accurate documentation. I felt small. He was covered in his own blood and he was smiling and he was standing and I felt small, like I had made a significant error in judgment about what he was. Advocate Virsk, what did you think he was before the incident? Commander Val, a soft species, young, pleasant. The kind of species that survives because others protect them. The kind that brings warmth to conferences because they're harmless. Advocate Virsk, and after. Commander Val, pause, not that. Not that at all. Something that has been patient for a very long time about what it is. Something that has been waiting in its softness for someone to test it. Something that long pause, something we have significantly underestimated. Something we should not have underestimated. Something that, I think, has been quietly waiting for us to understand it, and has not been worried about when that understanding would come, because it has always known that eventually it would. Advocate Virsk, is there anything else you want on the record? Commander Val, yes. I want to formally note that Officer Vane handled the incident with complete professionalism, complete restraint, and complete pause. Dignity is the word. I want that in the record. He did not escalate. He did not retaliate. He redirected my retinue, returned to his post, and completed his assignment. He was shot. He kept working. I want it formally noted that whatever disciplinary action is recommended for me, Officer Vane's conduct was exemplary. He should be commended. Advocate VIRSK. That commendation has already been filed. Commander VAEL. Good, good, that's good. Interrogation ends. Part 5. The broader implications. Section 5.1. Intelligence Assessment. Human Durability Profile. Document Type. Intelligence Analysis Report Restricted. Filed by Intelligence Director Calvin Wraith, GSIB Sector 9. Report Date. Stardate 7/4/1120, 98 days post-incident. The wiping incident has prompted a systematic reassessment of human physiological and psychological profiles across GSIB intelligence records. The following represents a summary of the most significant findings from that reassessment. Finding 1. The pattern was there. Looking back at our records, and this is genuinely uncomfortable to document, the evidence for extraordinary human resilience was present in multiple prior encounters. It was not recognized as such because we were interpreting human behavior through our own physiological frameworks, and humans consistently produce physiological data points that, when filtered through non-human interpretive models, look like anomalies rather than patterns. Examples from prior records. Case Record 4412, the Marin Patrol Incident. A Terran security officer sustained significant physical injury during a border confrontation and continued active duty for 4 hours before seeking medical attention. The incident was logged as subject appeared unaware of injury severity. Incorrect interpretation. The subject was aware. The subject made an active choice to continue. Case Record 5891, Delphani Medical Exchange. Terran officers participating in a cross-species physical endurance study consistently outperformed projections in the later stages of assessment when other species' performance was declining. The assessment report noted this as an unexpected result requiring further study. The further study was not conducted. It should have been. Case Record 7023, Frontier Station Incident. A lone Terran supply coordinator held a transit station during a system failure for 11 days without sleep longer than 2 hours, managing life support and communications for a crew of 43. The post-incident report commended her logistical performance. It did not note that the endurance itself was extraordinary. It did not ask how. In each case, we saw what we expected to see, humans doing their jobs. We did not see what was actually happening, humans operating at margins that, for any other species, would have constituted a breakdown. We missed the pattern because we weren't looking for it. We were not looking for it because we had classified humans as a soft species. They look soft. They present as soft. They are warm and expressive and communicative, and they smile a great deal. They cry openly. They discuss their feelings. They write poetry about sunsets and lost loves. They seemed to every external observer like exactly the kind of species that softness produces. We did not understand that softness and hardness are not opposites. We did not understand that you can be both, simultaneously, completely. Finding 2. The willingness. In the course of studying human historical archives made available through the Terran Diplomatic Exchange Program, our analysts have identified a consistent behavioral thread spanning approximately 400,000 years of documented human history. The thread is this: when pushed to the point where continuation should be impossible, humans continue. Not always, not every individual, not without cost. The cost is frequently immense, and humans document their costs with painful honesty in their histories. They do not pretend the cost away. But the continuation is consistent. The decision to still be there in the morning, which Officer Vane articulated in his psychological assessment, is not a philosophical stance unique to one individual. It is, the historical evidence suggests, a species-level trait. Humans have faced extinction-level events. They have faced them on their own planet before they had the technology or the knowledge or the resources that might have made survival rational. They survived anyway. They survived ice ages on nothing but endurance and cooperation, and the refusal to accept that the cold was stronger than they were. We have been treating humans as a species that has had it easy. We have been operating on the assumption that they are pleasant because nothing serious has ever tested them. The historical record does not support this assumption. Nothing has ever not tested them. They have been tested continuously, comprehensively, for their entire existence. They are pleasant and expressive and open and warm because they decided to be, in spite of everything, not because of the absence of everything. That distinction is significant. Finding 3. The smile. Our psychological analysts, in concert with the medical findings and the interrogation records, have arrived at the following interpretation of the smile that has become the defining image of this incident. It was not a threat display. It was not a stress response. It was not performed for any audience. It was recognition. In that moment, shot, bleeding, healing, standing, Officer Vane recognized something that he had perhaps always known, but had never had occasion to demonstrate. He recognized that he was exactly what 400,000 years of human history had been making him. That the accumulation of every surviving ancestor, every past test, every winter endured, had produced this. A being who could take a point-blank shot and keep his post. He was not surprised by his survival. He had never doubted it. The smile was for himself as much as for anyone, a private acknowledgement made visible. I knew this was in here. I knew it all along. Section 5.2 Formal Interview. Marcus Elway Vane, 6 months post-incident. Document type, extended interview transcript. Interview date, stardate 7/4/1182, 6 months post-incident. Interviewer, Senior Archivist Delouvain Cross. Location, GSIB Archive Station Orbital 7. Cross notation. This was not originally intended as a formal interview. I requested a meeting with Officer Vane on what I framed as a routine follow-up for file completion. I want to be transparent about this, because I think the informal nature of the meeting is part of why he spoke as freely as he did. We met in the station's observation lounge, which looks out over the drift field. He had coffee. I had the Vrethkin equivalent, which is warm and bitter and quite good. We talked for about 3 hours. What follows is a condensed but representative account. I asked him first about how he was doing, actually doing, not professionally. He said, "Good, healed up fine, you probably saw the medical reports. The entry site left a scar, which I was actually pleased about." I asked why a scar would please him. He said, because scars are honest. They're the body's way of keeping records. This one is a good record to keep. I asked him whether he'd been surprised in the moment by what his body did. He said no and yes. The no part is I've known or suspected for a long time that I had something like that in me. I'd had smaller versions of it, injuries that healed faster than they should have, endurance in situations where I expected to run out. I knew something was there. The yes part is the scale of it. I knew there was something. I didn't know it was that something. The degree of it surprised me. I asked about the smile. He was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the drift field. He said, "Do you know what it's like to carry something for your whole life and not be able to show it? Not because you're hiding it, just because the situation never arose. Just because nobody ever pushed hard enough to make it visible. You walk around knowing something about yourself and nobody else knows it, and you can't exactly bring it up in conversation." I asked him what he would have brought up if he could have. He said, That we're not soft, we look soft. We act soft a lot of the time because softness is the right choice most of the time. It's efficient. It's kind. It makes the world work better. But there's something underneath the softness that has been there for a very long time, and it is absolutely, completely, fundamentally not soft. And we've been out here in the galactic community for long enough that I think we notice people were making assumptions. And nobody wants to be the one to stand up and say, "Excuse me, you've misunderstood us." That sounds arrogant. That sounds aggressive. So we just keep being soft. And keep knowing what's underneath. And wait. I asked him, wait for what? He said, for the moment when it matters. For the moment when showing it isn't arrogance, it's necessary. For the moment when someone needs to know, not just speculate, but actually know what we are. He paused. Then he said, "That's what Vale gave me. I'm not grateful he shot me, that's not what I mean, but he gave me the moment. He gave me the situation where showing it wasn't a boast. It was just information. Here is information about what humans are. Now you know. Now you can make decisions accordingly." I asked him whether he worried about how that information would be received, whether making humans seem harder, more durable, more dangerous, whether that changed things in ways that might not be positive. He thought about this for a long time. He said, "Yes, that's the thing I lose sleep over. I don't want humans to be feared. We're not here to be feared. We've worked so hard for so long to be the kind of species that comes to the table and negotiates and builds things and makes connections across all these different kinds of minds and ways of being. I don't want one incident to undo that work." I asked, but he said, "But I also think the galactic community deserves an accurate picture of what they're working with. You can't have a genuine partnership with something you've fundamentally misunderstood. At some point, the truth has to come out. And when it comes out, I think the most important thing is the context in which it comes out. Vale shot me and I deflected his retinue and I returned to my post. That's the context. The truth about what we are came out inside of. We were doing our job. We were maintaining the security of an event so that 7 species could sign a treaty that will make 3 trade corridors safer for everyone. That's the context I'd want remembered." He finished his coffee. He said, "We survived a lot of things to get here, to get to the table. I don't want the fact that we survived to become a reason we're kept away from the table. I want it to be a reason we're trusted at it." I sat with that for a while. We both looked at the drift field. Eventually I said, "I think that might be the most important thing anyone has said to me in 31 years of this work." He smiled. Not the smile from the checkpoint, this one was quieter, private. He said, "Write it down." So I did. Part 6, Aftermath and Ongoing Developments. Section 6.1, Policy Changes Resulting from GSIB Review. Document Type, Administrative Memorandum, Internal Distribution. Filed by Director General Arvind Salis, GSIB. Date, Stardate 7/4/4201, 7 months post-incident. Following the comprehensive review prompted by the Caldera Platform incident, the following policy amendments have been formally adopted. Amendment 1, Human Physiological Classification. All GSIB intelligence files referencing human physiological resilience are to be reviewed and reclassified. The existing designation of humans as a Class 2, baseline durability species, is suspended pending completion of the review. An interim designation of Class pending, durability profile under assessment will apply. We acknowledge this is an unusual step. We are taking it because honesty is preferable to confident error. Amendment 2, Threat Response Protocol Revision. The existing protocol for responding to armed incidents involving Terran personnel has been revised to include the following notation. Standard threat neutralization assumptions may not apply. Terran personnel may continue active function following significant physical trauma. Assessment of incapacitation should not be assumed based on visible injury. This notation exists not to frame Terrans as threats. It exists to accurately represent reality. Amendment 3. Diplomatic Posture Review. A joint working group has been established, including representatives from the Terran Diplomatic Protection Corps, to review the current framework for human involvement in Galactic Sentinel operations. The review will specifically address whether existing role assignments for Terran personnel adequately reflect their demonstrated capabilities. This is not a militarization discussion. This is a partnership accuracy discussion. Amendment 4. Educational Distribution. The GSIB recommends that a summary of the Caldera Platform incident be included in standard species relations training for diplomatic and security personnel across all member species, not as a threat briefing, as a knowledge briefing. Species relations work best when the species involved actually understand each other. We have discovered that we did not adequately understand humans. We are correcting that. Section 6.2 Final Account. The Caldera Platform, Evening of the Summit. Testimony Source: Civilian Observer Yellen Brast, Final Submission. Date: Stardate 7/4/122, Evening of the Incident. Submitted as Personal Written Account offered for archive record. Brast submitted this account in written form, asking that it be included verbatim as a personal addendum to the official record. We have honored this request. By the time the treaty signing ceremony ended, the thermal fog had burned off. The geothermal vents do that in the late afternoon. They seem to exhale all at once, and whatever atmospheric effect was creating the fog just dissolves, and you're left with this completely clear, open sky. The ceremony ran long. These things always do. 7 species, 14 sets of representatives, 42 ceremonial signatures on a document that had taken 4 years to negotiate. By the end, the light over the Caldera platform had gone golden and warm, the way light does when it's coming in at a low angle and hitting the residual heat shimmer from the vents below. I stayed after the ceremony because I was filing my story and I wanted to be somewhere quiet to write. The outer observation ring had mostly cleared out. There was a maintenance crew moving through, collecting ceremonial materials, a few stragglers from the diplomatic delegations. And at the inner checkpoint, still at his post, because his shift didn't end until 2000 hours, Officer Vane. I watched him for a while, not in a strange way, just watching someone do a job. Watching someone stand in the golden light of a late afternoon on a platform above a geothermal field, doing what they'd been assigned to do, completely undramatically, 4 hours after something extraordinary had happened. He was wearing a fresh uniform shirt. You could see the slight stiffness of it, just changed, freshly pressed. Under the open collar where the neckline gave way, I could see the edge of the scar. Not much of it, just an edge. He caught me looking. I thought he'd give me the press correspondent look, the stop watching me look. He didn't. He gave me a small nod, the way you'd nod at someone across a quiet room, just, I see you, I know you're there, it's fine. And then he turned back to the checkpoint and stood there in the golden light, in his fresh shirt, with his scar and his quiet eyes, and whatever 400,000 years of survival looks like when it decides to wear a human face and stand at a border crossing, making sure a treaty gets signed safely. I finished my story. The ending line I wrote was this: They shot the human at point-blank range. He wiped the blood away. He smiled. He kept walking. He kept working. He stood in the late light at the end of a long day, and if you didn't know what had happened, you might look at him and see nothing unusual, just a man doing his job. And if you did know, you might look at him and understand, finally, why humans have been standing at borders for 400,000 years with that particular quality of quiet, and what that quality actually means. It means we were always going to be here at the end of the day. We were always going to finish the shift. You can push us to the floor, but you cannot keep us there. You never could. We just hadn't needed to say it out loud until now. My editor didn't cut that part. She said that's the whole story. She was right.